The Sikh tradition begins with Nanak, referred to as Guru Nanak by his followers. Guru Nanak's compositions are the foundation of the Sikh sacred text, the Guru Granth Sahib. His successors as the Gurus of the Sikhs all used the signature Nanak, conveying a unity of message and spirit. There is nothing in the compositions of Guru Nanak to support inequality of any kind. The divine has no gender for Guru Nanak. The divine light is manifest in all humans, and all humans can have equal access to spiritual liberation. Responding to societal norms, Guru Nanak defends womanhood per se against denigration and discrimination, enjoining social respect. He refers to women's indispensability for reproduction as a part of his defense. Guru Nanak also advocates the householder's life for his Sikhs and conjugal fidelity. But more fundamentally, Guru Nanak unequivocally creates spiritual space for women. The possibility of spiritual liberation is not bound to biology or social status. This ideal of equality is reinforced by his successors. The second, Guru Angad, makes the explicit statement that unlike the Vedas, the Bani compositions of Guru Nanak does not uphold inequalities of caste or gender. The third, Guru Amar Das, disapproves of the practice of sati, ritual immolation of widows. However, the Guru's articulation of spiritual space and social respect for women, radical for the 16th century South Asia, was made within the patriarchal framework of society, in which men dominated decision-making both within and outside the family. The Guru's writings do not lay down any detailed rules with respect to day-to-day social conduct, though they enjoin treating all humans with equal dignity, giving freely to others, being pure of heart and mind, avoiding specific vices, and so on. This guidance is given to all followers of the Gurus. In 1699, Guru Gobind Singh, the 10th and the last human Guru of the Sikhs, created the Khalsa order. While reinforcing the ideology of Guru Nanak and his successors with respect to the irrelevance of caste, this step also galvanized the Sikhs to actively pursue the cause of righteousness and resist oppression. But its implications for gender equality are debated by scholars. What was the bearing of foundational Sikh ideals and 18th century developments on women's role in the Sikh social order? There is a continual tension between the normative ideal of equality and institutions of patriarchy. A whole range of contemporary literature in Punjabi, Persian, and English can provide perspectives on this tension. Significantly, a new form of normative but non-canonical literature known as the Rahitnamas, Codes of Conduct for Sikhs, which emerged around the institution of the Khalsa, shows concern, among other things, for the relative position of women. These texts seek to provide normative guidance for a wide range of daily life in much more detail than anything in the Guru Granth Sahib, though the writings of Bhai Gurdas from the early 17th century, which have secondary canonical status, expand on putting the Guru's principles into practice. Other forms of Sikh literature of the period, like the Var, heroic poetry, the Gurbilas, poetical work in the praise of the Gurus, and the Sakhis, episodes in the life of a Guru, also provide empirical evidence on the subject. This lecture uses a range of prescriptive literature as well as other contemporary accounts to explore ideals and practices with respect to the role of Sikh women in the post-Khalsa period, particularly in the 18th century, which bridges the early and later Sikh tradition. Normative evidence on gender relations comes largely from the Rahitnamas. The most detailed of these is the Prem Sumarag, which the most reliable scholarship dates to the first few years of the 18th century during the lifetime of Guru Gobind Singh. Its first chapter states that a person who follows the prescribed way of life would attain liberation, whether a man or a woman. Mutual fidelity on the part of married men and women is underlined. The second chapter clarifies that religious beliefs and practices, ethical life, and the Khalsa initiation of the double-edged sword, Khande Ki Paul, are meant for both men and women entering the Khalsa order, which itself is seen as an ideal for Sikhs. The initiation procedure varies slightly by gender and women's marital status, but not the implications of initiation. Widows can also be initiated, with another slight variation in the procedure. Like Sikh men, women should acquire Gurmukhi learning and read Shabd Bani, the sacred word of the Gurus. Sikh women should associate with one another to reflect on the Shabad. There are numerous references to women in 5 chapters, which relate to the ceremonies of birth, marriage, and death, and to rulership and justice. A woman who has conceived should be administered the initiation of double-edged sword. Ceremonies on the birth of a son are to be followed on the birth of a girl with slight variations. It is obligatory for every young man and young woman to get married. Prescriptions regarding marriage, sanjog, require that the girl and the boy should be married at the age of 17 when both of them are grown up. Social norms of parents giving their daughters in marriage are accepted, along with customary ceremonies and exchange of gifts, but parents on both sides should limit their spending. In the actual rite of marriage, customs of both the families are to be followed within ardas, prayer, seeking peace and mutual love for the couple. The parents on both sides should regard themselves as equal, and none should try to demonstrate superiority in any way. In particular, the groom's parents gain merit by not taking anything from the bride's family. Patriarchal norms are reflected in injunctions that the bride should serve the groom and always be faithful to him, while the groom in turn should regard her as the other half of his body, Ardh Sariri, and be kind to her. He should share with her whatever he earns. The wife should look to her husband for everything and towards no one else. Sexual desire is regarded as an urge to be channeled or disciplined, and marriage is primarily for procreation. Remarriage of widows, Sanjog, is recommended on the assumption that women's sexual urges, like men's, have to be channeled. The Prem Sumarag is emphatic that treatment of the children born from remarriage is to be exactly the same as that of children born from an earlier marriage. The ceremonies to be performed at death are similar for males and females, with slight variations for married and unmarried women and widows. In the ideal Sikh state, visualized in a separate chapter, it is the ruler's duty to ensure that education is imparted to Sikh girls and boys. The ruler also should provide assistance to parents who do not have sufficient means to marry off their daughters. Other prescriptions emphasize that both sexes should participate in worship. Significantly, women's rights in family earnings and property are spelled out in the chapter on justice, which dent patriarchal norms by seeking to protect women's property rights. Prescribed inheritance shares are not always equal, but the rights of widows and daughters are clearly articulated. A daughter's son and daughter are equally entitled to inherit the property of their grandfather in certain circumstances. Overall, it is evident that the ideal of equality in the gender dimension is important for the author, and he recommends what seems to be significant modifications to customary practices of inheritance. The other Rahitnama which gives significant attention to gender is popularly known by its purported author's name. The author of the Prem Sumarag is unknown, and also dates to the early 18th century. Chaupa Singh was from a Brahmin background and had close ties to the Gurus. The approach of this Rahitnama to gender is quite different in some respects. It says that a Sikh who gives the Khalsa initiation to a Sikh woman is liable to be punished. On the other hand, it also enjoins that a Sikh should not give his daughter in marriage to a person who cuts his hair. It extols married life as the ideal for a woman and also offers a traditional, mostly patriarchal view of marriage relations. It explicitly condemns female infanticide. Both Sikh men and women should focus on spiritual liberation and not be misled by the directives of human rulers. Some injunctions are addressed directly to Sikh women. A Sikh woman should go to the Dharamsal, Gurudwara, twice a day. Sitting in the Sangat, religious congregation, she should keep her head covered to pay homage to the Guru Granth Sahib and concentrate on the Shabad Bani of the Gurus. She should take something in kind as an offering according to her means. She should also save a part of the household's raw food in the name of the Guru and take it to the Gurudwara or give it to a needy Sikh. She should offer better food to a needy Sikh than to a member of her own family. Men in Kalyug, the age of darkness, listen more to women than to their fellow men. The instructions given by the wife are expected to be very effective. Thus, correct religious, social, and domestic practices depend on the Gursikhni, the word used for a devout Sikh woman. A Sikh woman should read and understand the Guru Granth Sahib, adopting all the good qualities of a person mentioned therein. She should not believe in anything except the Guru, her husband, and the Sat Sangat. She should remain faithful to her husband. Instructions relating to women in the other Rahitnamas of the 18th century are not many nor new. They emphasize equal entitlement to spiritual liberation and to sacred food, fidelity, respect for women by men, ostracism for those who practice female infanticide, and marriage within the Khalsa. One Rahitnama, however, reiterates the conventional patriarchal idea that women should not be trusted with confidences. Another genre of 18th century Sikh writing, the Gurbilas literature, which narrates lives of gurus, provides some normative observations along with accounts of actual practices. Koir Singh's Gurbilas Patshahi Dasmi alludes to the undesirability of the practice of sati and narrates a story in which Guru Gobind Singh, when about to depart from this world, forbids his wife, Mata Sahib Devi, to commit sati. Women figure in several episodes of Kesar Singh Chibber's Bansavali Nama. He sympathizes with a woman who is unhappy because her husband is much less intelligent than herself. Chibber pays particular attention to the women in Guru Gobind Singh's household who played an important role during the challenging circumstances of the early 18th century. The Guru's mother, Mata Gujri, and his first wife, Mata Jito, figure in the developments before the institution of the Khalsa. The Guru's two other wives, Mata Sundari and Mata Sahib Devi, successively became the leaders of Guru Gobind Singh's followers after his death. Chibber gives a separate chapter to Mata Sahib Devi, who is said to have succeeded Mata Sundari on her death as the leader of the Sangat. Mata Sahib Devi is described as managing the gatherings of Sikhs during key festivals. After Mata Sahib Devi's death, Bebe Gulabo, an eminent Sikh woman, looked after the establishment in Delhi for some time. In the Mehma Prakash, the author, Sarup Das Palla, states that Mata Gujri persuaded Guru Gobind Singh to evacuate Anandpur when the Khalsa was under siege. Palla also relates that after his 4 sons had been killed by the Mughals, it is a devout Jat Sikh woman who chided Guru Gobind Singh for not taking revenge. In a different work, also titled Gurbilas Patshahi Dasmi, Sukha Singh notices women becoming Sikhs of the Guru and brackets men and women as the Guru's followers. 2 works composed in 1708 at Nanded, where Guru Gobind Singh passed away, yield interesting insights. The Amarnama contains an episode in which the wife receives great consideration from her husband in all decisions on matters important to the family. An episode in the Parchiya Sevadas underlines that service of the poor and the needy was undertaken by the Guru's mother, who was persuaded that the ideal of service, seva, was meant as much for women as for men. In the context of the Khalsa grappling with gender roles and gender equality, it is not surprising that after the death of Guru Gobind Singh, Mata Sundari and Mata Sahib Devi assumed leadership of the Sikh community. They issued edicts or instructions termed Hukamnamas as the Gurus had. The published Hukamnamas of Mata Sundari from 1717 to 1730, 9 in all, are addressed to faraway Sangats and prominent Sikhs. The available 9 Hukamnamas of Mata Sahib Devi from 1726 to 1734 are similar in their reach. The Sikhs are called sons in both sets of Hukamnamas and are asked to send donations for the open kitchen langar in Delhi, which was maintained in 2 separate establishments by Mata Sundari and Mata Sahib Devi. Arguably, the authority of Mata Sundari and Mata Sahib Devi was acceptable to the Sikhs based on their personal moral authority and not just as widows of the last human guru of the Sikhs. They attended to the everyday affairs of the Sikh community. The Hukamnama of Mata Sundari, dated 18 October 1723 and addressed to 5 respectable Sikhs by name, asks them to do impartial justice on 2 contending parties on behalf of the entire Khalsa of the Waheguru, and to ensure that their decision was based on moral justice, dharam nyaya. It is significant that instead of going to the panchayat or a court, the disputants went to Mata Sundari to seek justice, and she appointed arbitrators on behalf of the Khalsa. In a Hukamnama of Mata Sahib Devi, dated 30 December 1734, there is the order to construct a well in Patan Sheikh Farid for the use by Sikhs. Expenditure on the construction of the well through Pai Binta is to be debited to Mata Sahib Devi. Thus, both Mata Sundari and Mata Sahib Devi were maintaining regular establishments in Delhi with the help of Sikhs employed for various purposes, including secretarial work. The institution of langar was maintained as a part of each establishment. The Hukamnamas indicate that in secular matters as well, the wives of the Gurus took initiative on their own and that their authority was recognized by the Sikh Sangats within and outside Punjab. Persian and early European sources of the 18th century show little interest in the position of women among the Sikhs. Non-Sikh writers are interested almost exclusively in the political activity of the Khalsa. A few stray references, nevertheless, support the impressions gathered from the Sikh sources. A Persian work refers to Mata Sundari establishing a separate spiritual seat at Delhi, with Mata Sahib Devi taking her place after her death. Typically, early European writers base their observations on limited evidence, quite often relying on hearsay and generalizing too freely. On gender issues among the Sikhs, they were especially distant and cursory observers. Therefore, what they noticed incidentally is worth pointing out. Among the Europeans, the first to take notice of Sikh women or the attitude of Sikh men towards Sikh women was the Irish adventurer George Thomas, who was active in the southeastern Punjab around Hansi, now in Haryana. He observed that the women attended to their domestic concerns with diligence but were sometimes ill-treated. They were prohibited from accompanying men in their battles, but had frequently taken up arms to defend their habitations from desultory attacks, conducting themselves intrepidly. In the early decades of the 19th century, 2 British officers provided some impressions about the relative position of ordinary as well as upper-class Sikh women. Traveling through the Sikh territories in 1808, Captain Arnold Matthews, an officer of the Bengal Army, posing as a tourist, observed that Khalsa and non-Khalsa Sikhs were monogamous. Widow remarriage occurred only among Jats. Sikh widows rarely became satis in the Punjab. More well known is the Sketch of the Sikhs by John Malcolm. He commented negatively on the treatment of women among contemporary Sikhs, though he may have had some of the ruling class in mind in relation to their conduct with prostitutes and professional dancing girls. The complexities of the behavior of the elites in the context of gender are important to recognize, and recent work by scholars such as Priya Atwal has foregrounded the prominent roles played by Khalsa or Sikh women in the affairs of the court of Ranjit Singh and his successors. The British did become interested in the ground realities immediately before and after annexation. Their summary settlements and land surveys unearthed several landed estates held by Sikh women and numerous charitable grants, dharmarth, made by them during the last quarter of the 18th century, when a large number of autonomous principalities created by the Sikhs had come into existence. The women exercised authority or held estates and landed property, generally as the wives, widows, and regents of the emergent rulers. In the trajectory of the Sikh tradition, one might highlight three key events: its beginning with Guru Nanak, the creation of a canonical text by the 5th Guru Arjan, and the creation of Khalsa by the 10th and last human Guru, Gobind Singh. The Khalsa was an explicit enactment of social equality for Sikhs, but also a call to arms in the face of existential threats from imperial authorities. Some scholars have seen this as a source of tension for achieving gender equality, with a warrior identity promoting traditional masculinity in a society that was already patriarchal in its structures. However, close examination of the 18th century normative documents produced by Khalsa Sikhs, as well as evidence gleaned from other writings from that period, allows one to have a more nuanced understanding of the complexities of gender status in the Sikh tradition. The most comprehensive statement about the relative position of Sikh women is in the Prem Sumarag, now reliably believed to have been written close in time to the date of the institution of the Khalsa. Here, religious life was viewed as open to women as much as to men, though for initiation, a few differences of detail are mentioned. Monogamy and mutual fidelity were the cornerstone of the domestic life of Sikhs. For the ceremonies of birth, marriage, and death also, differences between men and women were of degree and not of kind. Sati was clearly disapproved of, and widow remarriage was allowed in certain situations. Within the general social and patriarchal framework, therefore, a substantial degree of equality was sought to be made operative. The most radical feature figuring in the Prem Sumarag is the right of women to hold property in several kinds of situations. The Chaupa Singh Rahitnama also visualizes an equal spiritual space for women. Other Rahitnamas say very little about women, and little that is different from the two main sources we have discussed here. In other Sikh literature, men and women are viewed as participating together in religious life. Women of Guru Gobind Singh's household play a considerable role in Sikh affairs, especially after his passing away. Their role in public affairs is emphasized by the empirical evidence in the Gurbilas literature and in Hukamnamas, but other women in public life did not belong to the Guru's house. In the second half of the 18th century, more women are mentioned as taking part in politics and administration, holding property, and giving charitable grants. Despite the relative indifference to gender relations, non-Sikh sources of the period point to Sikh women's initiative and active roles both within and outside the family. This reading of 18th century sources suggests that there was a normative program of addressing some gender inequalities in the Sikh social order during the period that the Khalsa was establishing itself in Sikh life. How this played out varied over time, place, class, and caste. However, the reading of sources makes it clear that even when the patriarchal family was taken for granted, there was an attempt at reduction of inequalities in some spheres of life.